Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Healer's Hut. We are doing some spring cleaning here today on February 2nd, which is hopefully when this video gets uploaded, because it's the Feast of Imbolc, or Candlemass, depending on what tradition you follow. And this feast, from reading about, I had found this in a book I read years ago and had wanted to do a video on this sooner because it kind of sounds like if it's an origin of why we do spring cleaning. And I really wanted to do this because I have had people comment to me just in my personal life about how around this time of year, February, March, starting to get a little stir crazy, cabin fever setting in, and they just feel stuck, they feel heavy, they feel stagnant. And this is another way that you can lighten the energy of your home. It just happens to be connected to a goddess. Or rather, the feast, sure, we'll just say the feast day centered around it is dedicated to a pagan goddess, but you don't have to be a pagan in order to do this. You can just do it, but I wanted to give you the history behind it. So why is that? Well, if you've watched my video on the Italian style house cleanse, then you probably saw how one of the Italian traditions, according to Mary Grace Farren and her book Italian Kitchen Witchery, that described how to uplift the energy of a home through one cultural way. And it's, you go through the kitchen. The kitchen's the heart of the home, the dining room, if people are arguing, it just spreads throughout the house, and you want to clear it up. You clean everything, you empty the cabinets, you sort through everything, you give away what doesn't work or it doesn't work for you anymore, and there you go. And you make this, you put a pot on the stove with some lemon and cinnamon and cloves, and I might be missing something, and you let it boil for a while. The perfume goes throughout the house, and that in and of itself helps to cleanse. And then you can take that and make a spray out of it. Now, in this case, you're just doing some good old-fashioned spring cleaning. But here's the thing I do kind of want to point out to you. What do we do when the weather gets warm? Maybe April, May. Depending on where you live, April might be a bit dodgy. You might have a few good days, but by May or June, definitely. You open the doors, you open the windows, you pull back the shades, the curtains, the shutters, whatever, and you let in as much sunlight, and you let the wind blow through. And what happens to the house? Well, the house feels significantly lighter because you're blowing out all of the stagnant and tired energy from the winter. So, this is exactly what this is. Now, this feast, if you know it from Roman Catholicism, you know it as Candlemass. Maybe. If you don't, ask your parents or grandparents. They might remember, because this feast day was a day when you would go to church and you could bring in candles, or candles were provided to you, and they were blessed by the church, because Imbolc, or February 2nd, or we're going to find another really interesting kind of modern connection, another origin story for you in here, but it's the beginning of spring. It marked the turn of spring. And Imbolc was connected specifically to the lambs and ewes, and it's when the ewes would start lactating. It actually translates to butterbag from Gaelic. And this was celebrated sometime in February. It would vary depending on where you were. Also, it would depend on how the year was going. So it might have been in the beginning of February. It might have been in the middle of February. The middle of February. It might have been in March, maybe late January if things were particularly warm. So it wasn't until the Gregorian calendar was put in place that it was slapped on to the date of February 2nd. So, and this feast day, like I said, marks the beginning of spring. The days or the nights are still long, but we are starting to see that return of daylight. You're starting to see that return of life. And especially as February starts to go on, the days get longer. And another thing is, if you're a gardener, this is probably around the time when you start trying to get your seedlings together. at least in maybe some of the colder areas, this is when you might start so that they might be ready to plant by Labor Day. Maybe a little later, a little earlier, but that's generally the plan. So, who is this goddess that this feast is in honor of? I have words. I know how to talk. I have notes here. The problem I was having was how to present this video because there's kind of a lot of information and I wanted to keep it slightly condensed. But this Feast of Imbolc is dedicated to the goddess Bridget. And if you also work with angels, you might find it interesting, or you might already know that the goddess Bridget is the counterpoint to the archangel Michael. They are both known as fire beings or fire deities. Well, Saint Michael's an archangel. He's not really a deity. And they have similar, not properties, not personality traits, aspects. That was the word I decided on. That worked. Yep. Yeah. We're going to go with that. Similar aspects. So, who is Bridget? Bridget was the daughter of the Dagda, who is kind of thought of as the leader of the Tuatha Dé Danann. And the Tuatha Dé Danann, for those that don't know, are the Fae. They are the fairy people of Ireland. And she is also the wife of Bress, who was a Fomorian king. The Fomorians were an older race that conquered Ireland before the Tuatha Dé Danann, and they are temporary rulers of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Now, what happens is, and there is some debate about this, if the goddess Bridget and Saint Brighid kind of blend together, because there is actually a Saint Brighid. She may have been a historical figure to whom aspects of the goddess were eventually kind of attributed to just through oral tradition. There are some speculations that, well, we can't get rid of her, can't beat him, join him, and they turned the goddess into a saint to kind of, because her presence and her worship were so strong that it was impossible, or the Catholic Church was having a very hard time stamping it out. So take whatever origin story you will, because it was said that Saint Brighid was born in neither within nor without a house, marking kind of that existence in an in-between state, associating her with the pagan goddess. It was said that she was fed the milk of a white cow with red ears. Now, if you're not familiar with the Irish mythology, Welsh mythology as well, not as sure about the Scots, but animals that have white bodies and red ears are often associated with the Otherworld, or with the Fae, or the realm of the dead. And so it is thought that she was fed by kind of a fairy cow. It was said that she could hang her cloak on rays of sun, and that in doing so, the mantle and the rays also connected her to the goddess Bridget because she wore a mantle of fire. So the fire association is furthered because it was said that whatever house Saint Bridget was in, from a distance would look as though it was a flame. It would just blaze with radiant light. And it was said that in 525, Saint Bridget became the abbess of Kildare, and no man was allowed to enter into the sanctuary where there was a sacred flame kept by, it was either said 9 nuns for 19 nights, or 19 nuns for 9 nights. But either way, a sacred flame was always kept going up until, I believe, the Norman invasion of Ireland in the 12th century, when it was briefly extinguished. It was relit, and then it was finally put out by King Henry the Seventh, I believe. I think it was King Henry the Sixth, I believe, put it out. I don't have the document here in front of me. I meant to pull that up too. I apologize. I hadn't planned on going this deep into who she was because I wanted to focus more on the aspects, but you should understand who it is that this feast is centered around, because it's kind of pivotal to the goddess. in this case. So the Eve of Bride is was a celebration for women. Men were not involved. They were invited back into the house after the women cleaned it, and they went through and they cleaned everything, predominantly focusing probably on the kitchen and the hearth, getting rid of as much of the ashes as they can. But they went through and they swept everything, they cleaned everything, they changed the straw. Everything was taken care of so that the house was nice and neat, but also to clear out some of the stagnant energy, some of the stagnant, mostly stagnant energy and just dirt that had been tracked in from the winter, and to make it presentable to the goddess. Because what would happen is this feast was kept or was done on the first day of spring or around the first day of spring, and a corn husk or a corn sheath was kept over from last year's harvest and braided into a doll. And they would make a little, what's the word? Like a crib or a bed in which the doll would be placed, and she would be adorned with flowers and ribbons and rocks and crystals and seashells, and then the men would be invited in to add on their decorations to the doll. This was a feast that was predominantly carried out by women for the goddess. And they would use flowers like primroses and daisies and snowdrops and any other flowers that happen to bloom around this time of year or start pushing their way through the snow. The women would go door to door and to the windows calling, "Let the bride come. The bride come in. The bride is welcome. Let the bride come in. Thy bed is made." And the corn doll of Bridget is placed in the basket with its small white wand of birch, small wand of birch, broom or bramble, or a white willow stick. And then the wand is straight to signify justice, and it has to be white for peace and purity. And it's given to mirror the coronation ceremony of the Irish king. So then people would do this, they would celebrate, they would have a meal together, and once it was over, everyone would leave the house, the residents would stay, they'd all get ready for bed, and they would sweep the ashes in the fire. So they would put the fire out for this feast. And what they wanted to do is they would leave kind of a thin layer, and in the morning they would look for scratches that the doll had made or that the goddess had made. They would look for handprints or footprints, because to see like scratches or like writing in the ashes meant that you had been blessed. If you saw a footprint, it meant you were especially blessed. If there was nothing and the ashes had been disturbed, it was an omen that you had somehow upset the goddess. So now this is kind of an interesting thing. So this is all going on. People would clean their houses. They would prepare this little corn dolly. They might prepare, if you're familiar at all with the Saint Brighid cross, and it's either a 3 or 4-armed cross that kind of looks like it's like triangular. I believe the 3-legged or 3-armed ones were used for animals. They were hung in the barn to bless the animals. The 4-armed ones were kept in the house for the sake of blessing the house. So this tradition might sound a little bit familiar to you, because in different areas of, whether it's the British Isles or even around the world, some animals start to poke their way out from the winter and check things out, decide what they want to do. Is it time to come out? Well, in Ireland, they would reference hedgehogs. And they would look and see if the little hedgehogs would come out of their den and look around and decide, hey, it's nice out, there's plenty of food, we can stay up, we can stay out, and that meant spring was coming. If there wasn't enough snow, or if there was too much snow, if it wasn't warm enough or it didn't meet their criteria, they would turn around and go back into their dens. Does this sound at all familiar to you, being that it's February 2nd? Groundhog's Day. I don't know if Groundhog's Day came from this tradition or if it's just a collective thing that different cultures have had around the world. But I read this and I was like, oh my God, it's Groundhog's Day. It's just with a different animal. And it's really funny is that it's had the same meaning. If the little hedgehog went back into his den, winter would continue. And it's, if you've ever, one of my favorite legends or stories really connected to this is if you've ever seen the Rankin Bass production of Jack Frost. Um, I think it may be from the 70s, maybe 60s or 70s. I'll find the exact date and put it up. But it's Pardon Me Pete makes a deal with Jack, and Jack sends his shadow to see Pete every Groundhog Day. And when Pete walks out, he'll wander around. He'll poke around a little bit. The news people are there, and then Jack's shadow attaches himself to Pete for a moment. He turns around, the shadow scares him, and he scampers back into his den so that he can nap for 6 more weeks. It's a little deal. It doesn't really explain how they get to this deal, except for the fact that Jack did it one time and they somehow eventually came to this arrangement, because it's kind of funny, because if you've ever seen the movie, the news people are like, that's funny, it's cloudy, there isn't a sun. How could he have seen his shadow? The humans are catching on. So, but yeah, no, same deal. Same deal in ancient Ireland. Hedgehogs. One of the other reasons why this is also named Candlemass, aside from the fact that you would go and get your candles blessed, there are 2 stories. One is Irish, one is Scottish. The Irish version is that Bridget promised to distract the attention of the crowds when Mary took Christ to the temple. She did this by wearing a headdress of covered in lit candles. And it worked so well that Mary declared the day should be remembered by blessing and purification of candles in the church. The Scottish version says that Mary and Jesus entered the temple and their candles were in danger of going out from the draft that was blowing. So Bridget came up from the crowd, took their candles, and walked in front of them into the temple. The candles never flickered, they never went out as she held them, and they seemed to burn with an unnatural brilliance. And Mary decreed that day should be known as Candlemas, or should be remembered by the blessing of the candles. So if you should choose to do this ritual, or if you just really want to bring some extra clarity and some lightness back into your home, do a really deep clean. And it's going to be, vacuuming, washing walls, pulling out furniture, dusting the furniture, whatever it is, washing windows, washing blinds. It's really interesting too, because this is actually a kind of cleansing and smudging ritual in hoodoo from one of Miss Ida's books. I think it's like Hoodoo Protection. Only thing is she uses ammonia, I think, in her cleaning. Everything, furniture, walls, windows, everything floor gets scrubbed down. I don't think you have to be quite that thorough if you want to be, sure, especially if you have had an instance where people in the family keep getting sick. Then doing a really deep clean in the bathrooms and the kitchens and the bedrooms really might be a solid idea to help, break out the bleach or your heavy duty cleaners, dilute them, obviously, and, go for it. But you will notice that the energy in your home is significantly lighter and brighter. And hopefully it helps to shift the energy. And if you want, if you have older kids that can help you, get them into it too. And teach them this lesson. And make sure you get into corners and walls. Because I was always told the heavy energy always sticks in corners. And the other thing is if you're going to do this, you can do this at any time, obviously. If you want to wait till it gets a little further in the spring to do it, or you want to do partial cleaning now, partial cleaning later. The author does make a really good point in that you should be doing this with the spiritual intent to raise the vibration, whether you wish to call in the goddess Bridget to help lift the energy of your home, whether you are setting the intention that only good things of light and love, that which is in the best interest of the family, everyone is hale and healthy and whole, however you need to word it, you're setting the intention by cleaning this, that the negative energy is no longer welcome here, and we are inviting in prosperous, good, healthy energy. People will prosper. They will be successful. And if you, it's really hard because I know up here it's still really cold and wet and potentially snowy, but you can take 8 rocks, spray paint them gold, and then stick them by your front door. And that's a feng shui way of bringing in prosperity. I've seen pictures of them outside the door. I don't know if it matters what side they're on. I just thought of it now, but this will help you clear your home. And so this is one of the origins of spring cleaning that I was kind of fascinated by, and who knows, maybe an origin story for Groundhog Day. I hope you're doing well, my friends, and until we meet again, take care, be good, and happy cleaning. So I'll see you again soon. Bye.